everybody, welcome to our Sunday talk show, The World This Week. Voting starts in Crimea to decide if this region will leave Ukraine for Russia. Unrest in the streets of Turkey's big cities as President Erdogan tightens his grip on free speech. The mystery of Malaysian air flight, was it a deliberate act? And here in Israel, the shipment from Iran, the missiles, the PR blitz, and the criticism. These are some of the issues we'll touch upon this Sunday. We'll start in Ukraine with Channel 9's reporter Andrei Kozhinov. Channel 9 is an Israeli television network that broadcasts in the Russian language. Hello, Andrei.
Hello, Jacob.
You're back from Crimea. Is this an historic day when Crimea goes back to Russia?
For the Russians in Crimea, Russian population in Crimea, it's definitely a historic day. For Ukraine or the Ukrainians, it's a national disaster. And you have to understand, the majority of the Russian population supports Russia in Crimea. So the results of the referendum is actually very clear. But the question is what's going on or what's going to happen with the Ukrainians staying in Crimea with the Tatars, which is a Muslim minority in Crimea, and the Ukrainian army, which is basically abandoned in Crimea.
So with that kind of result, will Putin just grab Crimea?
The Russia doesn't say it's going to get the Crimea as a part of the Russian Federation. So the situation might resemble the Prидnestrovia region in the Moldova or South Ossetia or Abkhazia region. It might be, the Crimea region might be a kind of standalone piece of the Russian Federation, while the whole world doesn't recognize it.
Yeah, but tell us, how was it there in Crimea these days?
Basically, it's very tense. You may see in the middle of the cities, inside the cities, everything is calm and peaceful, and people are really going to shops and going to work and going to kindergartens and so on. But outside the populated areas where the Ukrainian military bases are situated, the situation is very tense. Basically, the Ukrainian military bases are blocked by the Russian forces, and the women of the officers are basically standing there as human shields before the Russian troops. The Russian troops are not firing, so the situation is tense, and the question is what's going to happen tomorrow with the Ukrainian personnel, military personnel, whether they will be evacuated or whether they will stay and being attacked.
Yeah, chaos in Crimea. I thank you very much, Andrei Kozhinov, Channel 9, Israel here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our roundtable discussion this Sunday. With us are Alon Pinkas, former Israeli Consul General in New York, and Adi Schwartz, independent journalist and researcher. We'll start with a brief comment about Crimea and Russia. Is Crimea going back to Russia today?
Well, obviously we have to wait for the referendum, but the short answer is yes. Crimea is going to be either formally or quasi-formally annexed to Russia. The question is, will other parts of eastern Ukraine be further annexed by Putin? But Crimea is going to be Russia.
Adi, and quietly so?
I think the bigger question is whether this will be the first shot of a new Cold War. I think no, not yet. America will choose, even though the relationship will be even poisoned more than they are between Russia and the United States, I think America will choose a position which is an issue which is much closer to its national interest than Ukraine. Ukraine is simply not enough for American troops to fight for.
Get involved.
Yeah.
No, not enough. Alon, let's talk about the Iranian shipment, the diversion of the ship, what transpired after this. Were you moved, impressed?
By the intelligence gathering effort, yes. By the level of cooperation between Israel and the U.S., yes. By the actual interdiction, yes. By the silly show and tell that followed, no.
Well, Israel, tried to explain to the world. Netanyahu tried to explain to the world that there's danger.
It was an overshoot, as the screen says. I think it was overly done. It should have been done mildly, and the dissemination of information should have been done in a smarter way, in a more sophisticated way. It looked like a show. It looked like it was prefabricated. The fact that it took 10 days because the ceremony had to wait for Mr. Netanyahu, the prime minister, to return from the U.S. so he can join in on the celebrations looked too artificial for me.
Adi, is there another way to drive the point?
Yes, I would like to disagree, even though I agree with some of your remarks. Let's imagine the reverse scenario. Let's imagine that today, for example, Iran intercepts an Israeli shipment to an organization which is in Iraq, a terror organization, of rockets, of whatever other ammunition. That would obviously be a very big victory for Iran, militarily, also intelligence-wise, but also in the battle of PR, in the battle of public diplomacy. We must remember that we're in the 21st century, and it's not only about rockets, but about how things are perceived. And in that case, Iran would rightly say, well, Israel is just talking about talking about self-defense, but they're actually trying to topple the regime. In the same sense, when Iran now comes to the Western powers and says, well, what's the problem with us having, for example, nuclear capabilities? We are a benign regime. We don't want to harm anyone. Well, here's the problem. Iran is not only executing its own people,
but isn't the problem is that the world is not listening?
Well, I think the Ukraine issue has overshadowed everything in the last few weeks, but that doesn't mean that the operation itself wasn't right.
Right. Alon, the world doesn't care anymore about Iran?
Unfortunately, because it should care, because Iran, in terms of the potential explosiveness of it, is by far a bigger issue than Crimea or Ukraine. But the world is fatigued and fed up with the Iranian issue.
Now, with all due respect, we're talking about nuclear weapons in the hands of the Iranians.
That's
with all respect to Ukraine.
That's why I said it's a much bigger issue. Geopolitically, perhaps Ukraine poses a more sexy topic for the world media and for the world's attention. It's Putin and Obama. It's the former Soviet Union. He's a Tsar. He's trying to resurrect Russian imperial power, and all those cliches and statements. Iran is by far a more important issue substantively. Yet at the same time, this shows that there is a level of weariness and fatigue with the Iranian issue, on top of which, as far as the media is concerned, the world media, and through the media, the world public in respective states, thinks that there's a negotiation process going on. So why bother us with these missiles?
I think that just going back to the issue of Ukraine, I think bordering on the EU makes Ukraine much closer and much more important to Brussels, to Berlin. Iran is very important, but more to the long run. We've been hearing this story about nuclear Iran from the 90s, basically. So the Ukraine crisis is much more acute these days.
Adi Schwartz, Alon Pinkas, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ongoing unrest in Turkey over corruption, freedom of speech, and police violence. We'll speak with Arzu Gebula. She's a blogger from Turkey. We caught up with her in Berlin yesterday, where she's attending a conference. Hello, Arzu, in Berlin.
Hi, Jacob.
Tell me, in your words, from your perspective, what's been going on in Turkey?
A lot has been going on in Turkey these days. One of the biggest events has been the service for a young 15-year-old boy who was actually shot in the head during the Gezi protest, passed away this week. And there was a very big emotional service for the boy, supported by many of the Turks who live in Istanbul and across Turkey in many different towns. Unfortunately, the protests, the rallies that day, that evening, actually resulted in clashes with the police. There was another young boy who died at the age of 22. He was basically caught up in a fight between two different groups. And what was really strange was that the Prime Minister, he never mentioned the 15-year-old, but the very next day he actually condemned the protesters. And so you have all these protests and marches that's been happening in the past month, right in the run-up to the elections. And it's only a few weeks from the elections now. And it's really interesting to see what's going to happen now, because it's very tense atmosphere. The people are really frustrated, and I think the opposition is really frustrated. And so you have this a clash of interest almost, that anything can happen any moment in Turkey right now.
How much of this is targeted personally at Erdogan?
All of it is Erdogan personally. When the burial service of the 15-year-old, it was even the father of Berkin. He came up and he said it was Erdogan who murdered my son. It was Erdogan's police who murdered my son. And I think this is a very emotionally yet very strong statement coming from a father of a child who didn't have anything to do with the protest. He just went to buy bread that day. And so you have many fathers like the father of Berkin and many other mothers and very many other young people and citizens of Turkey who are fed up with Erdogan's policies, who are very frustrated with the way he's been running the country and really the decisions that he's been making. And so this is all against him.
I see. As a blogger and an internet user, how do you feel the clampdown of Erdogan?
Definitely. I feel that it's worsening. A lot of journalists lost their jobs since last summer because they got kicked out of their newspapers or the publications that they were working for. A lot of the online community is very concerned right now because of the new internet law and the developments that's been happening in the country with regard to that. And so right now, a lot of the times, Twitter is one of the main news sharing networks for many of the people in Turkey. And anything that's related to internet is such a big issue and topic of debate because of what Erdogan is doing. And so while I'm not feeling threatened, even though there are repercussions for people who are expressing their freedom of speech online, it is very, the concern is definitely there, and because there is, you don't know what's going to happen basically to you or to anyone else who is doing similar job like you do.
Right. Arzu Gebulay, Turkish blogger, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Digital media. Peter Barron is a senior Google executive whose expertise is digital media. He made the transition from being a senior BBC television producer to the world of clicks and likes. Mr. Barron was here in Israel this week and he's joining us. Thank you, Mr. Barron.
Lovely to be here, thank you.
Well, you're a journalist, you were the editor of BBC's Newsnight. So what's a serious guy like you doing in digital media?
Well, I became very interested in digital media really from the beginning. I suppose maybe around about 1995, my life changed almost overnight because I just became hooked on the internet. And I suppose the point about the internet was, you know, in the past you had to wait for things that you were interested in to come along. With the internet, you just go straight there. But I just became ever more interested in digital media, in what the internet could offer, all the amazing tools, and eventually ended up at Google.
Yeah, but seriously, when you compare, you know, traditional journalism to what's going on online, aren't you at least a bit concerned?
Well, I think the opportunities for digital journalism are extraordinary. I mean, if I think back to my career, when I first started in television, it was very difficult to broadcast. And the point about the internet is it has really given access to all the world's information to many, many people around the world. But it also more recently has given people the ability to gather information and to publish to the world. So now, obviously, a lot of the stuff that is published to the internet isn't of great value. It may be nonsense, but that doesn't mean that there's the opportunity to provide a huge amount of really high quality content. And of course, traditional journalists are using the internet as well, and all the extraordinary tools that are available to do great things with journalism these days.
The problem with news organizations, among others, is that they have no business model now because Google takes all the advertisement revenues.
Well, the fact of the matter is that advertisers are choosing to advertise online because that's where people are, and that's because online advertising is very effective. If I'm searching for something, by definition, I'm interested in it. So it is certainly right to say that advertising revenues have moved online. But we're sending huge numbers of clicks through to the websites of news publishers, something like 10 billion clicks a month, and that's generating something like $9 billion worth of revenue for news publishers all around the world. So it's been a tough course, but news publishers are finding ways of making money online.
Well, as Google becomes really the information gateway to the world, What is your responsibility to contain lies and hate, anti-Semitism, for example?
Yeah, the internet clearly is a great force for positive content, but of course, unfortunately, there are people who want to use it to spread bad content, and we have very strict guidelines that govern the content that appears on YouTube. We want people to express themselves, but we don't want people to show violence or hate speech or pornography, for example. So if anything like that appears on YouTube, we have we rely on the community to flag that bad material, and then we have people who are moderating that material and taking it down very, very quickly. But we, of course, understand that it can be used in bad ways too.
Mm-hmm. Peter Barron of Google, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And this has been The World This Week. See you here next Sunday. Have a good week.